People's Drug was a retail drugstore chain that opened in 1905 and closed in 1994. Thank you for your suggestions.
I'll be right there. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Ryan.
My mom called?
Yeah?
I didn't even know she had to take any medicine.
Personal questions, private conversations.
Can I ask you something? Was my dad not around? Well, is this stuff expensive?
At People's Drug, you can talk to your pharmacist one-to-one or even man-to-man.
Now her insurance covers you both.
Cool. Thanks. Wait, we can stop kidding around.
People's Drug.
People's was founded in 1905 by Malcolm G. Gibbs. With $800 in 1905, he went into business for himself with a broker named Howard Silsby, who put in $8,000. They opened the first People's Drug Store at 824 7th Street Northwest, just north of King's Palace. Back in the early 20th century, small drugstores focused almost exclusively on prescriptions. Energetic young entrepreneurs like Gibbs were transforming the business, offering a wider variety of merchandise, advertising heavily, and offering discounted prices to lure in large numbers of customers. The formula had worked for the Woodward and Lothrop department store, and it would work for People's Drug as well. After 4 years, People's had outgrown its small storefront and moved to a spacious multi-story building at the busy intersection of 7th and K Streets on the southeast corner of Mount Vernon Square. According to a Washington Post article, the new store was a marvel of retail innovation, a department drugstore in which the stock ranges from the simplest drug compounds to teas, coffees, and rarest of perfumes. Finished in gold and white with many mirrored surfaces, the first floor featured drugs and drug sundries, including the prescription counter, as well as an elaborate soda fountain and cigar counter. Upstairs were rubber goods, surgical instruments, and miscellaneous stock. As opening souvenirs, the store gave away a handsome leather cigar case to male customers, and a combination mirror, powder puff, and puff box containing a high grade of face powder to customers of the feminine sex. In 1912, a second location was opened, and by 1916 there were 4 locations. The chain continued to grow from there, often opening up locations in wealthier neighborhoods. By 1930, it had 110 stores operating under the People's Drugs, Days Drugs, and Sheer Drug names. There were variations of the name, with People's Service Drug and Gibbs People's Drug being the most common. People's wasn't the first drugstore to have a soda fountain, but it was certainly one of its biggest promoters. Across the country, the heyday of the drugstore soda fountain was from the 1920s to the 1950s, and it made going to the drugstore on the corner as much fun as dropping it in to the neighborhood bar. Soda fountains originally dispensed just cool carbonated drinks and ice cream, but beginning in the 1920s, People's soda fountains also featured sandwiches, cakes, and pies, offering stiff competition to lunchroom chains. After decades of success, everything was changing at People's in the 1970s. Founder Malcolm Gibbs had died back in 1944, and while continuing to expand, the chain had lost its luster. In 1974, an Ohio-based drugstore chain called Lane Drug Corporation gained a controlling share of People's stock. People's had 252 stores operating in the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, New York, and New Jersey. That year, there were 5,500 employees with sales of $220 million and profits of $1.87 million. The new ownership overhauled the stock at each store, tailoring it to local areas' best-selling items, and began a campaign of aggressively purchasing other drug chains, old stores were overhauled with the latest 1970s decorations. The remodeling of the stores also gave way to the removal of the iconic soda fountain. The reasoning behind it said they could no longer compete with the fast food restaurants that were sprouting up everywhere. By the 1980s, Peoples was experiencing hard times. The big grocery chains such as Giant and Safeway had discovered that by opening their own pharmacies, they could steal much of the drugstore's business, and the competition was withering. In 1980, Peoples acquired the Indianapolis-based Hog Drug, which had 80 drugstores in Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, and Kentucky. In 1984, Peoples was acquired for $320 million by the Canadian conglomerate Imasco, the Canadian arm of the British American Tobacco and owner of Shoppers Drug Mart and Pharmaprix in Canada. At the time, Peoples and its divisions had close to 800 stores and became one of the country's leading drug chains. After being acquired by Imasco, Peoples quickly acquired Rhea and Derrick in 1985 and also took control of the Florida Shoppers Drug Mart locations. Not long after being acquired by Imasco, Peoples decided to sell some of their stores and concentrate on the mid-Atlantic states. First to go were the 35 Florida Shoppers Drug Mart stores that were sold to Eckerd in 1986. Next was the Atlanta-based Reed Lead Drug to Big B Drugs in 1989 for $50 million. After the dust settled from the sales, Imasco decided to unload the Peoples drug chain, as Peoples was not performing at the level Imasco had hoped. In late 1990, CVS Corporation purchased Peoples for $330 million. CVS kept the Peoples drug name in place, remodeled most of the stores to the CVS format, and improved the store's sales. The Peoples name was considered to be too strong a name to change it to CVS Pharmacy immediately. The name did ultimately change in May of 1994, just a few months before the Peoples Drug's name would have celebrated its 90th anniversary. So what are some of your favorite memories of this place? Leave a comment or a suggestion for a future video below. Be sure to hit that like button. Thanks for watching.